What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue with our 2025 college football schedule preview and very early projected record series. The Texas Tech Red Raiders are up next. Before we look ahead to 2025, let's take a look back at what Texas Tech did in 2024. Here were my projections and predictions last year for Texas Tech. My projection for this team was at 7-5, and then my prediction for them was at 8-4. I was right on the money with their prediction in the regular season at 8-4. So Texas Tech did about what I expected them to do. And, as a consistent program in the Big 12, you're kind of expecting Texas Tech to be right there around the 6, 7, 8 win mark. Also maybe 9 is your really best case scenario and everything. But yeah, Texas Tech is coming off an 8-4 season last year. Definitely, a better season compared to the year before in 2023. And they were 8-5 overall if you count their bowl game loss at the end of the year in the Liberty Bowl to Arkansas. But you look at the schedule from last year for Texas Tech. First off, you look at who they played in the non-conference. They played Abilene Christian at Washington State in North Texas, so not a tough non-conference schedule. Of course, Washington State ended up kind of being maybe as good as we think they were not going to be because we don't really study the Pac-12 anymore because there's not really a Pac-12 conference anymore, but Abilene Christian ended up going into overtime. That game was kind of closer than we didn't really expect it to be, but they took care of, North Texas and everything, so maybe the non-conference schedule was a little bit tough for Texas Tech, but either way, they were able to win 2 out of those 3 non-conference games, and then you take a look at the Big 12 schedule. First off, at their home place, they played Arizona State, Cincinnati, Baylor. They also played Colorado and West Virginia, so 5 home games in the Big 12 last year. They lost to Baylor and Colorado both at home. Of course, Baylor ended up being a surprise team, from last year, and Colorado ended up being as good as we think they were going to be. And then you look at their road schedule. They played Arizona, at Iowa State, at Oklahoma State. So yeah, they had 3, or actually they also played TCU. So they had 4 away games in the Big 12. They lost to TCU on the road. So that was the only loss last year on the road for the Red Raiders. Arizona, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State ended up not being as good as we think they were going to be. And I kept saying this for a lot of the, Big 12 projections that I've already done so far. A lot of these teams in the Big 12 were not really as good as we think they were going to be last year. Again, for example, Oklahoma State and Arizona, those 2 teams were disappointing teams. Oklahoma State was one of the worst teams in the Big 12 last year, so again, it was a pretty easy schedule for Texas Tech because of that. What does it look like, though, for 2025? Here is that schedule for the Red Raiders. Before we go game by game, let's take a look at who Texas Tech plays in the non-conference this season. So you look at their non-conference schedule, they will play University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. That's an FCS team. And then they play Kent State, one of the worst group of 5 teams from last year. And then you got Oregon State, a former Pac-12 team and everything. So, again, I don't really know what to call, the Pac-12 anymore, the Pac-2 or whatever you want to call it. But last year they played Washington State. This time they would play Oregon State, one of those other Pac-2 teams that did not leave the Pac-12 after those teams left to go to the Big Ten and everything. But yeah, they'll play all 3 of their non-conference games at home. A pretty easy non-conference schedule in my opinion here for Texas Tech. So that's your non-conference schedule. Let's take a look at the home Big 12 schedule here for the Red Raiders. They will play 4 home games in the Big 12. They'll play Kansas, Oklahoma State, BYU, and UCF. So UCF and Kansas were not 2 good teams last year, and then you got Oklahoma State as well, which they were a disappointment. And then obviously BYU was a pretty big surprise last year, so that might be your biggest home game here for Texas Tech. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if Kansas and Oklahoma State probably turn things around this year. They got 2 well-coached teams. I don't know about UCF. It's kind of like a new era down there for the Knights and everything after Gus Malzahn left to go to an offensive coordinator job. So that's your home schedule. Let's take a look at the away schedule. They'll play 5 road games in the Big 12. They'll play Utah, Houston, Arizona State, Kansas State, and at West Virginia. So this is a pretty tough road schedule. Utah, Arizona State, Kansas State, and West Virginia, those are all tough places to play. Houston's kind of like a trap game. Houston wasn't really good last year. Utah was kind of a disappointing team as well. But Arizona State, Kansas State, and West Virginia, these are all going to be really tough games on the road here for Texas Tech. But, when it comes to the Big 12, every game is pretty winnable, and also a lot of games can really go either way. And a lot of teams can't really, win the next week either, even though if they're on a winning streak and everything. So, yeah, that's the away schedule for Texas Tech. Let's go back to the schedule now and go full game by game now for the Red Raiders. They will start things off with University of Arkansas Pine Bluff on August 30th. Then you got Kent State after that on September the 6th. Then also Oregon State on September 13th. So they play all three of their non-conference opponents in the first 3 weeks. So there's a really good chance that Texas Tech could probably start 3-0 or 2-1, depending on what happens in the Oregon State game. But I think they have a pretty good chance to start out 3-0. And then they open up Big 12 play on the road at Utah on September 20th. They get a bye week here actually before playing Houston on October the 4th. So they got back-to-back road games there with Utah and Houston, but the good news is they get a bye week in between those back-to-back road games, which I think is really good news if you're a Texas Tech fan. After that, it's Kansas at home on October the 11th, and then at Arizona State on October the 18th. Then you come back at home to play Oklahoma State on October 25th. Then it's on the road at Kansas State on November 1st. Then back at home for BYU on November 8th. UCF also at home on November 15th. And then they close things out with West Virginia on the road on November 29th. And they get a bye week before playing West Virginia on the road. So yeah, their bye weeks are kind of, really kind of weird in a weird spot, I should say. The first bye week, I think that's a pretty good spot because it's right before a back-to-back road game trip. And then obviously you've got West Virginia not until like the end of the season in the month of November. So I don't really like how the second bye week sets up. You kind of rather have the bye week probably right before playing Kansas State on the road or even BYU at home because that's kind of a big game there in the month of November against the Cougars. But either way, this is a schedule that's not too bad here for Texas Tech. And again, a lot of winnable games here on the schedule for the Red Raiders. Let's now get into the projection here for Texas Tech. This is the scale I'll be using here for their projection. If it's a 1% game in the red, pretty much that's counted as an automatic loss. And then your 20% games in the orange. Those are games where Texas Tech will be about a double-digit underdog. 40% games in the yellow, they'll be about a clear underdog in that percentage by 6 or 7 points. 50-50 games will be in the white, games that really can go either way. And then your 60% games in the purple. Those are games where Texas Tech will be favored by about a touchdown by 6 or 7 points. And then your 80% games in the blue, they'll be favored by double digits in that percentage. And then obviously your green games are pretty much your easy wins and also your automatic wins as well. So we'll start with those automatic wins here in the green for Texas Tech. I think you've got a couple of those. University of Arkansas Pine Bluff and Kent State. These are two games that the Red Raiders should definitely take care of business in. Again, University of Arkansas Pine Bluff is an FCS team. I know they struggled against Abilene Christian last year, but I think they definitely will be able to take care of business this time. They probably learned a lot from last year's game against Abilene Christian, and they'll be probably ready to go here against University of Arkansas Pine Bluff. Kent State, one of the worst teams in the country last year, and definitely at the Group of 5 level. They should be able to take care of business in that game. So I think these two games are definitely over that 95 to 99% mark. And then I'm going to put Oregon State here in the blue. I think Texas Tech will be favored by double digits here against the Beavers. Oregon State had a first-year head coach last year. We'll see if they can turn things around. But because it's at home and based off of how they finished last year, I think Texas Tech will be favored by double digits because they're playing at home in this one. So yeah, that blue game is also counted as a win. It's not really a, automatic win just like the green games are, but it's still counted as a win either way. It's just a slight win. Let's put it that way here for Texas Tech. So yeah, I think they'll be favored by, double digits here against Oregon State. And then we go to the purple games where I think Texas Tech will be favored by about a touchdown, like 6 or 7 points. I think you could put 3 of these games here in the purple, and they're all coming in the Big 12. Kansas, Oklahoma State, and UCF. The reason why these games fall in the purple in that 6 or 7 point category is because Texas Tech has 3 of these teams at home. That's the reason why, and Texas Tech is kind of like a tier above these 3 teams. But I wouldn't be surprised if two of these three teams definitely turn things around this year. Again, Oklahoma State is a really well-coached team by Mike Gundy, and then Kansas, obviously, they could probably turn things around. You never know about the Jayhawks. I mean, they could be a sneaky good team in the Big 12. I mean, they finished the season strong last year, but they didn't make it to a bowl game. And then, obviously, Oklahoma State was one of the worst teams in the Big 12 last season. So, yeah, we'll see if the Cowboys can turn things around. Again, UCF is kind of a hard team to figure out because it's kind of like a new era down there with a new coach. Again, I don't know how good the Knights are going to be this year of UCF. Again, Gus Maslon is gone, so that's definitely a huge loss here for the UCF Knights. But I think three of these games, you can put them in the purple here for Texas Tech. They'll be favored by 6 or 7 points. And then you got, a total of like 6 50-50 games on here that really can go either way. You got Utah, Houston, Arizona State, Kansas State, BYU, and West Virginia. All these 6 games can really go either way. I know Utah and Houston were not really good last year. They definitely should be in the purple, but because they're on the road, that's the reason why they turn into 50-50 games. And then obviously Arizona State, Kansas State, BYU, and West Virginia. These are all pretty much even matchups here for Texas Tech, and they're all very winnable games. Now, 3 of them are on the road. That's going to be pretty extremely tough here for the Red Raiders to win one of these 3 games on the road. But yeah, BYU is a home game, so maybe they can win that game and everything. But yeah, Texas Tech, they have a 6 total 50-50 games here that really can go either way. So that does bring me to my projected record here for the Red Raiders. And we count the green games as wins, and we count that one blue game as a win, and then you average out all 3 of these purple games at 60%. Then you average out these 50-50 games at 50%. Let's say they split these 50-50 games. They win 3 out of the 6 50-50 games, so that gives you a total of 3 wins, plus the blue game against Oregon State and then the 2 games. That's going to give you a total of like 6 wins, and then you're going to be favored in these purple games by like less than a touchdown. That's going to give you a total of 9 wins. So that's what the projection comes out to be. It's 9-3 here for Texas Tech. Now, it could be 8-4 if they probably would have slipped up in one of these purple games against Oklahoma State, Kansas, and UCF. I wouldn't be surprised if they did go 8-4 again, because when it comes to the Big 12, you're going to slip up somewhere, even if you're undefeated. Yeah, Texas Tech, I think, will probably slip up in one of these purple games. But as of right now, just based off of the projection, and if you split those 50-50 games, yeah, that's going to give you a total of 9 wins, and then including those 3 losses in the 50-50 range, that's going to give you a projection of 9-3. So, yeah, that's a very high projection for Texas Tech. I don't really feel confident with it. Again, I do expect Texas Tech to be right there around 6, 7, 8 wins. Again, they are a very consistent program in the Big 12, just like TCU and a lot of these other teams in the Big 12 as well. So, yeah, the Red Raiders, I think they're at their best case right now. It's at 9-3. Worst case is probably maybe 7-5 or maybe 6-6, just barely making it to a bowl game. But I think they're at their best case right now as 9-3. I don't know if they can go 10-2 or not, but with this schedule, they can probably do that. You never know about Texas Tech. Again, they had a pretty good year last year. We'll see if they can build off that year from last season and continue to really, be consistent here in the Big 12. But yeah, 9-3 is what the projection is for Texas Tech for 2025. Do you guys agree or disagree? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. And also give me your thoughts about Texas Tech's schedule down in the comments below. Is it tough or not so tough? Thanks for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.